Herkimer County Cemeteries, stone art, and the people who rest there. Oak Hill Cemetery in Herkimer. Austin B. Clack was undersheriff during the 1906 Chester Gillette murder trial. This was our first walking tour that we did, and we wanted to know where Austin B. Clack was buried. So we went to the caretaker's office, and he looked it up in the books and said, oh, he's buried over in the mausoleum. So he had to get the keys, and so we went over and he unlocked it and let us in. And this is a picture of the crypt where Clack is buried. And the mausoleum was not open the night of the tour. Judge Irving R. Devendorf was a lawyer, district attorney, county surrogate, state Supreme Court judge, and philanthropist. He is most famous for being the presiding judge for the Chester Gillette murder trial. His home is on the corner of Prospect and Church Street. Today is the law office of George Amy. Morris Mark was a wealthy businessman in Herkimer. He owned the Jen Knitting Mill. The photo on the left is the Marks Mansion, which was on the corner of North Prospect and Church Street. It was built in 1885 and is Richardsonian in style. The mansion had a watchtower that all of Herkimer could be surveyed from it. The mansion was abandoned from 1936 to 1946. Temple Beth Joseph bought the property and built their temple, which was dedicated in 1949 on this site. There are very few mausoleums in Oak Hill Cemetery. This is the Marks one, and it has a stained glass window on the back of the wall of the mausoleum. Notice the Corinthian columns where the arrow is pointing. They're on either side of the front door of the mausoleum. Close and on the back wall is a stained glass window. Henry Marcus Quackenbush in 1871 formed H.M. Quackenbush Company here in Herkimer. He invented and manufactured an air rifle. He sold his patent for the extension ladder. He is best known for his design and manufacture of nutcrackers. The gravestone is very plain, which surprised me. It says a lot about Henry Marcus. Now we're at Mohawk Cemetery. George Broomhall was born in England. At age 22, he came to Mohawk, where he worked for H.J. Root, who was a merchant there. Root bought grain from area farmers. Broomhall converted it to malt, which was shipped on the Erie Canal to a distillery in Newport, New York. About 1840, he built a stone warehouse on the canal bank. The photo on the left is the front of the gravestone, has pillars on the sides, and an insignia with a letter B for Broomhall in the top center. The photo on the right is of the back side of the gravestone. It has the birth and death date of George and Margaret Hartman Broomhall. On the top, it has the saying, "Until resurrection morn." You can hardly see it in the photo, but it's there right on the top, near the top. Francis Elias Spinner was born in Mohawk. He had been a lieutenant in New York State Militia, sheriff in 1834, a congressman, a commissioner at the state lunatic asylum in Utica. He was involved in banking, building of railroads, and most famous of all, Treasurer of the United States from 1861 to 1875. His image is the last living person to be depicted on sheets of money. Back then, they came in sheets and they had to be cut. They were called shin plasters. Spinner had hired women to cut sheets of money. He said women were more adept at using scissors than a man, and he would pay them less. But the women were grateful for what he had done for giving them jobs. They hired a sculptor, and they had raised money to hire the sculptor to have a statue of Spinner sculpted. When it was completed, it was put in Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C. The officials of the Treasury Department did not want the statue put out in front of the building, so it went into storage at Corcoran Gallery there in Washington, D.C. Ladies of the DAR heard about the statue, and they were able to raise money and had the sculpture brought to Myers Park here in Herkimer, and it was brought and dedicated there in 1907. Addie Shoemaker Barker was daughter of Christopher and Mary Jane Shoemaker. I picked this one for the stone art. Close up on the right is of the lily of the valley, which symbolizes innocence and purity and virginity. The crown symbolizes mortality, which is there at the bottom. An angel is in prayer on one side of the stone. I just did a close-up of it. The crown symbolizes immortality. Zinc monuments don't end up with lichen growing on the surface, a common problem with granite monuments and other types of monuments. The disadvantage of the gravestones that are made of zinc is the color. They're bluish in hues, which some people feel is cold. I don't find them cold. I like them. Unlike grave monuments that were made of granite or marble, the zinc gravestones are hollow. Gregory V. Jarvis grew up in Mohawk. He was a member of the crew of the ill-fated Space Shuttle Challenger, which exploded during initial ascent from Cape Canaveral on January 28, 1986. The Mohawk High School was renamed to the Gregory B. Jarvis High School in his honor. The stone on the right is for brothers Carey and Carlton Walworth. Both fought in the World War I in France. They were killed on September 29, 1918. They were from Herkimer. You may be wondering, why are they buried in Mohawk? Their father did not want them buried in Oak Hill Cemetery, which is on German Street. He felt that he didn't want that there because of World War I. But he even petitioned the village to remain renamed German Street, but they wouldn't because they said it didn't have the connection to World War I. It was for the German Palatines who were here in 1722. So he decided that, okay, you're not going to change the name of the street. I have my sons buried in Mohawk. And pro patria on top of the stone is Latin for one's country. Armory Hill Cemetery in Ilion. This is Lucius Van Alstyne and his wife, Wealthy. I picked this one for the symbolism. The urn symbolizes a veil, the veil between earth and heaven, or sorrow and mourning. The phrase "gone to pot" may have had its origin as a reference to cinerary urn. Palm leaves symbolizes victory or triumph over death. Oak leaves symbolize strength, endurance, eternity, honor, liberty, hospitality, faith, and virtue. Lillian Potter Pelton and daughter Flossie Pelton and husband Clinton C. Pelton. I like these because of the wooden cross and the little log on the right, because Flossie was a child who died very young. The ivy symbolizes fidelity, which is wrapped around this log cross. Joseph Cullen Root founded the Woodsmen of the World in 1890. One of his objectives was to provide a decent burial for all members, which included the log gravestone. Until the 1920s, the group stopped providing gravestones because it became too expensive. Root created Woodsman's Memorial Day, which was celebrated on June 6th each year. Notice a Lilion stone there in the middle. The two logs in the back that are sticking up and the two in the front, I thought they were broken off, but when I did more research, when a log is broken off like that, it symbolizes a life cut short. William Foothrop, I love that name. He worked as a repairer for the Remington Typewriter Company. If I remember correctly, this is the only mausoleum in the Ramery Hill Cemetery. The clover leaf represents the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The stone on the right is James Hutchins. He worked in the office at E. Remington and Sons. Eliphalet Remington, a son of Eliphalet, the founder of Remington Arms, was one of the bearers for James's funeral. I like this gravestone for the unbroken branches, and the wheat symbolizes a life well lived. Joseph Ackler had been a laborer, school teacher, grocery store operator, and a bookkeeper for Remington Typewriter and Remington Arms. In his youth, he went to the Klondike goldfields. He lived to be 103. He attributed his longevity to plenty of exercise. He was shoveling snow at the age of 93. Van Hornsville Cemetery. Owen D Young and Josephine Sheldon Edmonds Young's gravestone took me by surprise. I thought they would be very ornate, but they're not. They're very plain. And this says that Owen D Young was a down-to-earth person. He was an industrialist, businessman, lawyer, and diplomat. He founded RCA, which was a subsidiary of GE in 1919, became president of GE in 1922. He established the Young Plan in 1929 and was formally adopted in 1930. It provided for a reduction in the annual amount of Germany's World War I reparations. He was selected as Time Man of the Year in 1929. Nicholas Shaver. This is one of my favorite zinc monuments. It makes me think of a pineapple, what's up on top, spikes sticking upward. The top left close-up is a figure pointing upward, pointing towards a heavenly reward and ascension to heaven. Shaking hands can symbolize farewell to earthly existence, welcome to heaven. The bottom left is a plow symbolizing the harvest. Nicholas may have been a farmer. The cross and crown symbolize victory and Christianity. Delinia Acker Filkins was an American supercentenarian who was the first person verifiably to reach the age of 113 in 1928. The Guinness Book of Records for 1976 to 1979 stated that Delinia Acker Filkins is the oldest authenticated centenarian. She held the record until 1955 when Betsy Blair attained it. She had often expressed the opinion that voting was not for women, that the home was their place and not at the polls. But during the last campaign, she expressed a desire that she wanted the right to vote. But by then, she was too old and unable to leave the house to go to the polls. E. Robert Mason and Josephine Edmonds case. Bob and Josie were longtime members at the Herkimer County Historical Society. Bob founded and edited Legacy, Annals of Herkimer County, and assisted in the production of Society's Herkimer County at 200. Josie was editor of Herkimer County 200. Both Bob and Josie served on the Society's Board of Trustees. They loved their cat, Luna, that they had her etched on their gravestone. Notice the intertwined wedding rings with the hearts on the stones with their names and dates. I just love this stone. It's really neat. Oakview Cemetery in Frankfurt. Thomas Leach served in the Civil War, according to his obituary. He served on the gunboat Santiago de Cuba. The close-up on the right is of the Grand Army of the Republic symbol with a rose garland underneath. The statue on top of the gravestone is of a woman pointing to heaven. Bud Fowler. He was a professional baseball pioneer. He was born John W. Jackson. He was the first Black professional baseball player, beginning his career in 1878 as a pitcher with the Worcester team of the New England Association. He, as the first African-American in professional baseball, before the color lines were drawn, he changed his name to Bud Fowler when he signed to play in white leagues in 1885 with the Keokuk in the Western League. He could play every position and played for 20 different teams, not because of his playing ability, but his race. When the color line became established in 1894, he organized the Page Fence Giants, an all-Black team sponsored by the Page Woven Wire Fence Company of Adrian, Michigan. This establishment led to the foundation of the Negro League teams, which he played and managed until his death. In 1909, the Remington baseball team played the Black Tourist baseball team, which was managed by Fowler. He was living with his sister, Harriet V. Jackson Odom, when he died. The Society for American Baseball Research dedicated the marker in 1987. Before that, it was an unmarked grave. April of 2013, the entrance of Doubleday Field was named Bud Fowler Way, along with a plaque on the brick wall that is on the first base bleachers. The mayor of Cooperstown proclaimed it Bud Fowler Day. Bud finally got the recognition he deserved. Seymour W. and C. Elizabeth Morgan Holdridge. Seymour conducted an undertaking business with his cousin A. Judson Holdridge from 1893 to 1902. In 1904 to 1910, he ran the Holdridge and Gutman Funeral Home. I was fascinated with this boulder that is being used as a gravestone. I wonder, where did the boulder come from and how did they ever get it there? Emma Osman Freeman. I included this gravestone because of the stone art. The angel head with wings symbolizes flight of the soul to heaven. The drapery separates earth from heaven, and the calla lily symbolizes marriage and fidelity. East Schuyler Miller's Grove Cemetery. Edgar Jackson Clack and his wife, Mary C. Smith Clack. Edgar wrote under the name of Simeon Seymour Cox for the Herkimer and Ilion citizens for over 50 years. His poetry was published in books and newspapers. His book, History of Schuyler, the town of Schuyler, Herkimer County, New York, is in the Society's collection. It has a wealth of genealogical information in it, and it is in our library for others to use. Susan Hutchins Hall. I chose this one for the stone art. The fern in the lower left symbolizes humility, frankness, and sincerity. The female figure is kneeling with a book hanging down in her left hand, and her right hand is holding her forehead. And the scroll on the left has her birth and death dates on it. Michaellemons. This gravestone is unique in design. The material, I don't know what it is made out of, but it's very hard to read the inscription on it. Michael served in the War of 1812 as a private in the New York State Militia in Captain Hutchins' company. The circular Revolutionary War marker that's placed on this gravestone was for his father, Jacob Clemens, who served as a private on the Continental Line. He fought at the Battle of Oriskany. Jacob died in 1813 and is buried in Boonville. John Lintz and Mary Polly Oyer Lintz. I picked this one because of the story of their son-in-law. Their daughter Margaret was married to Dwayne Jackson. But on September 5th, 1906, Dwayne was visiting Lucy and Azor Hill in Utica. They were walking with him to get on the trolley on Bleecker Street. They noticed he was short of breath. He dropped dead when crossing Mary Street. The coroner found $133 in his breast pocket and a circular ad that was a patent for medicine for sufferers of rheumatism and heart trouble. His newspaper account, the newspaper account of his obituary stated that he had a premonition he was going to die. He had told the Hill sisters that it'd be the last time he would see them. He had no living relatives at the time of his death. His wife, Margaret, had died in 1901. Dalesville Cemetery. Alfred and Anna Dodge are buried in the highest part of the Dalesville Cemetery. Notice the red flag that's there besides the American flag. That is for the fire department. Alfred Dodge has started Fire Department Hose Company number 1. Today it's the Dalesville Manheim Historical Society building. Alfred came to Brockett's Bridge in 1874 from New York City. He was originally from Germany. He was working in New York City in a piano factory, or piano selling business. In 25 years after coming to Brockett's Bridge, he built a felt mill, gave impetus to a piano sounding board factory, a piano hardware plant, a piano factory, auto harp factory, 3 sawmills, a woolen mill, and a felt shoe factory. Dodge developed early pension plans, profit sharing, and a model for Social Security in 1876. He even built a school. He laid out the streets, and in 1881, they renamed Brockett's Bridge to Dalesville. Henry Voorhees Building and Abbey Cross Building. Harry had a mine on the hill on the Fulton County side of Dalesville. He even went down in the mine and lit gunpowder in it. He was brought up in a tub safely without injury. His obituary stated, his mind turned to geology and mineralogy. He investigated every rock and crevice among the ledges from the Poly Country to Mohawk and opened several veins, in some of which excuse me, he actually secured silver ore, but never paying quantities. He had a silver mine in Hamilton County in 1870s. Laurel wreath symbolizes triumph. Johnpembroke Spockard served in the Civil War as Colonel and Commander of the 97th New York Volunteer Infantry and was breveted Brigadier General, U.S. Volunteers on March 13, 1865 for meritorious services during the war. It's hard to say. Spockard was captured at Gettysburg and held at the notorious Libby prison, but not before the regiment under his command executed the capture of the colors of the Confederate 20th North Carolina Infantry and 382 prisoners. He was part of the Libby prison escape on February 1864, where 108 other Union officers dug a 50-foot tunnel out of the prison. They were recaptured and put back in prison. Spockard was released in 1864 After the war, he returned to live out his life at Brackett's Bridge. Adolf and Mathilda Freigang. Adolf came from Germany to work at Doll's shoe factory. I picked this one for the stone art. The ivy symbolizes friendship and immortality. Herr Ruth in Frieden means rest in peace. Here, rest in peace, excuse me. Wheeler and Marion Bliss Knapp. Marion was his second wife. His first wife was Harriet Kramer, and his third wife was Sarah Turner Dusler. Let me start over. Carol will be able to edit it. Wheeler and Marion Bliss Knapp. Marion was his second wife. His first wife was Harriet Kramer, and his third wife was Sarah Turner Dusler, who was 19 years younger. Wheeler married Sarah in 1902. Wheeler had a sawmill in Dallsville, which burned to the ground in 1886. I don't know what the objects in the semicircle symbolize. The marker with the three chains linked together stands for the International Order of the Odd Fellows. The F stands for friendship, the L stands for love, and the T stands for truth. Ingham's Mills Cemetery. Adam B. Bellinger was veteran of the War of 1812. He served as a corporal in the 90th Regiment of Wright's New York Militia. Sometimes gravestones will have a verse etched on it. This was a fine example of one. It reads, Jesus, lead me through the darkness while I sleep. Still watch by me till the morning. Then awake me, dearest Lord, to dwell with thee. Charles and Marina Snell Zimmerman had 9 children. Notice the different shaped urn on top. The floral design at the bottom of the stone is a bellflower, which symbolizes attributes of consistency and gratitude. They are part of the Snell Zimmerman family. And every year they have a reunion. Abram Vetter. The oak leaf symbolizes faith and virtue. This is an example of a cleaner that someone used on this stone that was inappropriate. You can see how it kind of damaged it. You can still read it, but they probably, I don't know what they use, but I do know that using shaving cream is a no-no. D2 biological solution is specially formulated to remove environmental pollution such as dirt and staining from biological soils such as mold, mildew, lichen, and algae from indoor and outdoor structures. Also, wet and forget can be used. Erastus Ingham was a deacon at the Ingham's Mills Baptist Church and a farmer. He was the first postmaster in Ingham's Mills from 1861 to 1879, and that's the year he died. The zinc monument has an angel on top that's praying, and the head is looking upward towards heaven. Drapery seen on grave headstones usually depicts the veil between life and death and the crossing of that plane. And to others, it symbolizes God's protection until the resurrection. Drapery remained a favorite symbol of the Victorians and often seen, particularly covering urns. The Yale Monument. 1637, 1937. The western part of this cemetery, I should mention Salisbury Rural Cemetery, was given to the association by Milton H. Yale in 1907. You can see it from the road, which is Route 29. If you're going on your way to Salisbury Center, it's on the left-hand side. The 5 figures on the front of the monument are visible from the road, with 2 additional figures on each side. And the relief figures depict the settler, the surveyor, the revolutionary soldier, the farmer, the inventor, the developer, the postmaster, merchant, and executive. Linus Yale was the inventor of the Yale lock. His home he had a foundry in Newport. The Octagon House in Newport was built for his daughter. And Linus is not buried in Salisbury or in Newport. He is buried in Arms Cemetery in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. Walton C. Ford was a blacksmith. The triangle has the words love, purity, and fidelity on it. In doing research, I found that this was the symbol for the Sons of Temperance, which was founded in New York City in 1842. The Sons of Temperance was a brotherhood of men who promoted temperance and mutual support. It had spread rapidly throughout the United States during the 1840s. It was best known fraternal temperance group at that time, but its membership was a secret. Brothers' names were not publicly revealed. This protected the group. It would have been embarrassing if a brother were violating its codes of conduct. It also protected brothers from any negative consequences of membership. The group's 3 goals were: 1, shield brothers from the evils of temperance; 2, provide help in times of sickness or death; 3, raise the character of brothers. Becoming a brother was not easy. First, a man had to be nominated by an existing brother to be considered for membership. Then 3 other brothers would investigate him. They needed to see if they thought he was worthy. The Sons of Temperance was also a mutual insurance company. It paid $30 to the family of each brother who died. It paid $15 to the family of each brother whose wife died. Brothers had to visit any sick brother at least once a day, and the names of any brothers who were ill were announced at each meeting of the brotherhood. George L. Perkins and Elizabeth M. Poole Perkins were married in 1915. He died 4 years after their marriage, and she died the following year. The ivy symbolizes friendship and immortality, and George was a member of the Independent Order of the Odd Fellows. And you can see the rings there in this top of the monument with ivy on either side of the IIOF. Lorenzo William and Lucy Burrell Carroll. Lorenzo owned 3 dry goods stores from 1835 to 1839 in Devereux, today's Stratford. September 7th, 1839, he was appointed postmaster in Salisbury. He was a dairy farmer before moving to Little Falls in 1861, where he became a cheese buyer and shipper. In 1852, he was elected sheriff of Herkimer County. He served on the board of directors of the Herkimer County Bank. He and Lucy had 8 children. He owned land on Mexico Road in the town of Salisbury. He was also a buyer and seller of property. And you can tell he was very wealthy by looking at the size of this gravestone. And the reflection you see in the gravestone is of Carol Hobson on the right and myself on the left. Now we're at the Stratford Cemetery. A.B.L. Kibbe came to Stratford on the Fulton County side, in 1805, At the time, there were only 5 settlers in the town. He was appointed Justice of the Peace in 1821. The draped urn is on top of the gravestone. The bellflower in the middle, it's kind of dark, and you can hardly see it there, right there where the arrow is. And the bellflower symbolizes attributes of consistency and gratitude. As you can guess, another zinc monument. Dorcas Perkins is a family member. He was the oldest well-known Adirondack guide in the northeastern part of the Adirondacks when he died. Dorcas owned a sawmill in Stratford. He is a guide to fishing and hunting parties that were visiting Stratford. This zinc stone on the back is a deceased man in a boat, representing a voyage or crossing over to the other world. It also suggests a return to the cradle or womb. The angel is guiding the boat heavenward. George P. Ferris was a millwright and was a member of the Sons of Temperance. The lamb symbolizes innocence. Notice the drape on top of the urn, and the crown symbolizes Christ's crown of thorns. Colonel John 6B and Sally Vanderwalker 6B. John received the title of colonel from serving in the New York State Militia during the Mexican War. In the middle of the monument is inscribed John and Sally's dates of birth and death. Their 3 sons, Nicholas, John, and Jerome, all served in the Civil War and all died in the war. The first to enlist was Nicholas in the 34th Regiment of Company K on June 15, 1861, and was killed May 30th, 1862 at Fair Oaks, Virginia. John was the next to enlist in Company K, the 34th Regiment, on October 21st, 1861. He was killed June 30th, 1862 at Nelson's Farm in Virginia. Jerome enlisted in the 69th Infantry on August 26, 1864, and was killed in action at the retaking of Fort Stedman near Petersburg, Virginia on March 25, 1865. All 3 are buried where they were killed. It's really a beautiful monument. It's one of my favorites. Millville Cemetery. This is Salome West, or Salome, was the daughter of Mason Salome West. The open book can be compared to the human heart, its thoughts and feelings, open to the world and to God. Emily Morey was the wife of Valentine Morey. They lived in the town of Fairfield. This is the first 6-sided urn that I've seen on a gravestone. Dr. Bella J. Ward was born in Middleville. He graduated from Albany Medical College of Union University in 1884. He was an allopathic doctor, which was a doctor who practiced alternative medicine, and he practiced in Troy, New York. His wife was Emma F. Neely, and they had no children. It is rare to see flat gravestones in cemeteries in Herkimer County. The palm branch is a symbol of victory and triumph, peace, and eternal life. Robert Helmer was married to Emily. He had been a landowner and cattle dealer. In 1860, they were living in the town of Fairfield. His real estate was valued at $9,000, another example of an urn on top of a granite gravestone. Newport Cemetery. This is John Hawkins, who was the proprietor of the Nelson House, and at one time the Waverly Hotel in Herkimer. Sarah worked alongside her husband at the Waverly Hotel. John had run hotels in Johnstown and Middleville. John was president of the Village of Newport in 1879. This monument has a ball on the top, which symbolizes the circle of life and eternity. Sometimes on the base of the gravestone is the name of the manufacturer. This one is Jenny and Nalbach, Utica, New York. And it was a monument dealer. Frank J. Jenny and Charles B. Nalbach. Nalbach was the furniture, listen to me, funeral director. Jackson Smith and Phoebe Dorman Smith. Jackson was a wealthy farmer in the town of Norway. He was a town assessor for 25 years, director and president of the National Bank of Newport, president of the Grangers Exchange in Herkimer, and president of the Grangers Insurance Company. He was a 59-year member of the Newport Masons and later transferred his membership to the Herkimer Lodge. He'd had been a member of the Women's Aid Society, the Eastern Star, and the auxiliary of the Old Ladies' Home in Mohawk, which is today the Mohawk Homestead. Jackson lived to be 102 years old. He was living in Monrovia, California at the time of his death. Notice the bolster. It's a former gravestone where a cylinder, usually at least 18 inches in diameter and 36 or more inches long. Usually they're laid horizontal. This one is vertical. Urn on top, the fleur-de-lis design around the top of the cylinder symbolizes the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I did mention it. Henry Burlingame was married to Cornelia Waterman. He was a Republican and served as town of Newport supervisor from 1874 to 1876. He bought the cotton factory from Henry Waterman, who was his father-in-law. Notice the Corinthian columns. It looks like a roof with dentils over the top of the columns. And notice the insignia HB at the bottom. HB would be Henry Burlingame. And our last slide is Dexter Sherman. He had been a farmer, teamster, laborer. Dexter and his wife Elizabeth had 4 children. They lived in Newport for many years. In 1860 census, Dexter is living in Contra Costa, California, working for a rancher and dairyman. And Elizabeth is living in Newport with the children. Dexter is back with the family in Newport in the 1865 New York State Census. The lily of the valley symbolizes humility, and the pine cones symbolize full of life with children. For more information on the people in this program, you can email us at herkimerhistory@yahoo.com. And I have the scripts of all 12 cemetery walking tours. Thank you for watching. Sorry for the coughing in the middle of it.